Good morning. So, yesterday we stopped where we were talking about Godfather's claim to fame and how it has been canonized over a period of 40 or last 45 years. And we stopped where we were talking about how Pauline Kael, one of the most eminent film critics, she called it the best gangster film ever made in this country, which is a big shot because Gangster is essentially an American product, the other being the Western. Yeah. So, there are two influential American genres which are essentially Americans and which are, one is Gangster and another Western. And if Godfather is labeled the best gangster film ever made by none other than Pauline Kael, then it must have made quite an impact at that point. Now, from here we will talk about the advent of New Hollywood and how Coppola was at the center of the so called New Hollywood movement. So, we had the French New Wave, we had the Italian Neorealism, and then we had the Hollywood or the New Hollywood period, the Hollywood New Wave, and Coppola was at the center of it. So, how do you create a movement? How do you usher in a movement? Whenever we call that a particular period is new, if it is New Hollywood, then there has to be old Hollywood as well. Okay, and old Hollywood was essentially what we label as the classic Hollywood. We will be talking about classic Hollywood as well. Today we are not talking New Hollywood in much detail, but understanding the Godfather as a canonical text, okay, and we were doing it as continuation of understanding what is a canon. We have already done Citizen Kane. So, I am just recapping whatever we have been doing earlier. So, today this class is not about New Hollywood per se, but just to give you an introduction to what is canon and then a brief overview of the New Hollywood period and how Coppola became the center of the so called period of New Hollywood, which was basically ushered in by Warren Beatty and Arthur Penn in Bonnie and Clyde. Warren Beatty acted and produced a movie called Bonnie and Clyde, majorly scripted by someone called Robert Towne. Is the name familiar to you? An excellent screenplay writer. I want you to do a good search on Robert Towne, because today I am going to refer to Robert Towne with reference to the Godfather as well. So, Robert Towne was essentially a screenwriter, also a director, but his fame is by being a screenwriter, and he started his career with Bonnie and Clyde. So, Bonnie and Clyde started the so called period of New Hollywood. Now, Coppola, who already had 3 art films not so successful before the Godfather, and if you read up some of his autobiographies or works on Coppola, you will find how much he had to struggle against the studio bosses. And who was the studio boss? A Paramount studio, and headed by, at that point, Robert Evans, not Robert Towne. Robert Towne was a screenwriter. Robert Evans, the studio boss. Okay. So, roadblocks were put before Coppola at every step of the way. He was prevented from casting Al Pacino. That was the major setback, and there were times when he was told that he will be fired, okay, any moment, and there are people who are willing to take over, because it was felt that he is experimenting too much, especially with the cinematography and bringing in all these New York method actors. Remember, no one wanted Marlon Brando. Today it may appear huge. Today it may appear to you that Godfather is inconceivable without Brando and Pacino combination. But there was a point when the Paramount Pictures, especially Robert Evans, they just didn't want these two men on board. So, every day it would be Coppola is going to get fired or Pacino is going to get fired. Marlon Brando came on board with much difficulty, and that is another story altogether. Another successful movie, now the first Godfather was released in 72. We are still not, we are still discussing 72 Godfather, not 74. Now, when the 72 Godfather was released, it was also the year of the famous movie The French Connection. It got 5 awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and also Gene Hackman. Yeah. So, starring Rod Schneider and others. Okay, so that's The French Connection. Now, what kind of a movie is The French Connection? Directed by William Friedkin. You know, he later on went on to direct The Exorcist as well. But The French Connection was Friedkin's major success, which came in 1972, a couple of months prior to the release of The Godfather. And what kind of a movie is The French Connection?
It's a heist movie.
Heist.
Gene Hackman plays a cop.
Yes.
And it's famous for that car chase sequence where he's chasing the train.
Okay. Okay. Please watch The French Connection. Okay. He has given you some of the defining features of the film. William Friedkin was another member of this new Hollywood community who was extremely influenced by the French new wave directors, especially the Godards, the Godards and the Truffauts, and also the Italian neorealists like Fellini and Bertolucci. Those were their gods. Okay. There is a classic story when William Friedkin was shooting a mini series on Alfred Hitchcock. Okay. It was called This is Hitchcock or something like that, and the big man came to the sets and he just watched William Friedkin shooting a series called This is Hitchcock, and he didn't utter a word about whatever Friedkin was doing. He just said one thing, Hitchcock to Friedkin famously, you must wear a tie. You must wear a tie. Okay. And Friedkin said, see, what the hell, I don't even like this guy. It's not that I am a fan. Okay. I come from the school of the Godards and the Truffauts. Who is he to tell me to wear a tie and all? So, it is that kind of, I am just narrating this anecdote to tell you that who were these people and who were they influenced by. They were not influenced, perhaps Orson Welles, yes, that was a major influence, but not the classic Hollywood types, definitely. Their influence, perhaps Elia Kazan, who is East of Eden, you recently watched. Okay, so New Hollywood was essentially a rebellion against the classic Hollywood school of filmmaking. So, Coppola throughout the filming insisted on casting New York actors rather than established names. Apart from Marlon Brando, no one is an established name in the movie. Everyone is a newcomer. There was a call for actors, and all these bit parts were enacted by theatre people from New York theatre community. Okay. Al Pacino, Robert Duvall. Duvall was, yes, but not a box office magnet. Even Marlon Brando at that point was considered a box office poison. It was said, and Coppola admits, that the studios, the executives told him that if you take Marlon Brando, whoever is coming to watch the movie, even they will stay away. Okay, he was that much of a poison to people. Okay, so Marlon Brando was not wanted, Pacino definitely not wanted. James Caan, yes, people were studio executives because he was considered quite good looking, movie star, good look. So, the actor who plays Sonny, yes. So, casting of Pacino was a major contentious issue, and Robert Evans particularly disliked him. They wanted Robert Redford in that role, and Coppola insisted on using non-trained, non-professional actors For example, the bodyguard Luca Brasi, okay, he was a professional wrestler, okay, and if you look at him, he is huge, he looks the part. He is the one who gets strangulated in the restaurant. By who? By who?
Solozzo.
By Solozzo. Good, good. You have been watching the movie by Solozzo. Okay. Adherence to the ambience. Now, what ambience is that? When is the movie set? Good, 40s. A dead giveaway clue is that Michael is a war hero. He returns from a war. And which world war could it be? The Second World War. Okay. It's the 40s. So, he wanted to adhere to the ambience, and that's very important, because if you remember the Mafia, the original screenplay, I am not talking about the novel The Godfather by Mario Puzo. The studio had commissioned Puzo to write a screenplay called The Mafia, remember, which no one wanted to direct. So, the studio compelled Puzo to rework the draft of The Mafia based on The Godfather and set the ambience in the 70s with hippies in it and rock and roll music. Okay, because they said this is what is selling, you know, Easy Rider was a major success, Bonnie and Clyde. Okay, so why make a movie of the 40s which will be such a cumbersome project and definitely expensive, because you have to recreate a period. The 70s are here and now. So, let us try to do that, let us try to take advantage of the hippies around us, and let us fill it with drugs and all kinds of interesting things, so that people will come. So, but Coppola yearned for a particular period, the post-war America, when American power in business as well as in politics was at its peak. So, that is the period he wanted to capture, and it meant period cars, having period cars, period costumes, sets, restaurants, clothes, everything has to be true and faithful to the period, that is the 40s. So, if you watch the movie, you will find it is so real, it is so authentic. The famous scene where Michael first comes across the news of his father being gunned down. He is not killed, but he just reads it on one of the newspaper stands. Case stops and she directs his attention to that, and there is a newspaper stand. And would you believe it, that suddenly Coppola was told by his art direction team that in the 40s there would be no newspaper stands. Okay, and what does he do? And then the next shot is that Michael reads the headline and runs across the street and goes to a telephone booth. And it so happened that on that, because that scene was shot on location. Okay, so actually on an actual street, and he was told during the 40s there was no phone booth here. Okay, so what do you do? Okay, so he said, okay, let us just get it. Okay, you know, some imagination, some poetic license has to be there. Let us create a kiosk, let us create a phone booth. So, it was there, it's shot on location, yes, but they also did a lot of recreation of the period. So, that is how difficult it always is. 40s cars, I mean, if you watch the movie, it is not the 70s cars, I mean, all those black little cars, they all belong to the period. Okay. Another important, and I think this is one of the most defining feature and of new Hollywood period as well as of the Godfather in particular, is that they eschewed the theme of good versus evil. But then I am going to give you another example which soon came after the Godfather and took a very regressive kind of cinema, which took Hollywood again years back in time. But then we will talk about that soon in our later classes. So, no good versus evil theme, which is again an import of the French New Wave. You will also find that in the world of these of the mafia, there are no civilian deaths. So, you do not get women being dishonored or people just being shot dead rampantly. It's all about a gang war. Okay. So, the only person who represents the law is the corrupt police officer, and he is also shot dead early in the movie by Michael. So, the question that the film raises very aptly is what is evil, the nature of evil. How many of you have read the novel? Oh, quite impressive, you have read the novel. Okay, Shweta, do you think that the movie is quite faithful? Give me a couple of reasons. Please focus on her. She has read and he has read. So after that, and after that, the little girl in red. So that 3 people.
It is largely faithful, although there are certain elements in the books which aren't really focused upon in the movie.
Yes.
Like for instance, the wedding in the beginning when Sunny is with that woman, and how all the rumors surrounding Sunny's virility and all of that isn't really touched upon in the movie as such.
Okay.
And apart from that, Luca Brasi has a more prominent role in the books.
Yes.
It's mentioned in great detail how he butchers a lot of people.
Actually, there are plenty of plots. Okay, which so when I first read in fact, I first watched the movie and then read the novel, and I felt, what is this? Okay, now where is the movie here? And I am glad he did the movie the way he did. Okay, so the screenplay is written by Mario Puzo in collaboration with Coppola, and Coppola has gone on record stating that he was extremely put off by the novel at certain places, and if you read the novel you will understand what places. Okay, he felt that what am I making? You know, and there are subplots which are so huge and which are so voluminous, which have nothing to do with the main plot. They just go on and on and on, and you wonder what's happening here. So it's pulp to the core. Okay, but then Coppola raised it to the level of art. Okay, so this is one instance where the movie is any day better than the novel. Okay, forget that he has left out several things. Okay, but he has whatever he has, and there are certain scenes which are not there in the novel, but they do figure in the movie, and I will tell you where. And the reason why I was trying to draw your attention to Robert Town, who wrote a couple of scenes. Okay, and therefore, you know, cinema as an art comes into picture. So now we are talking about how the movie was photographed by Gordon Willis, and this is an important name, cinematographer Gordon Willis, who liked to shoot in closed spaces, dark shuttered rooms, just to give that feel of the claustrophobic world of the mafia, as contrasted with the sunny, brightly lit atmosphere of the wedding. And we were calling the movie the other day the best home movie Coppola ever made. That's the term he uses for the film. That's the best home movie I ever made. And there are instances, if you read up on the history of or the making of the Godfather, then in several of the sequences, for example, in baptism scene, in the wedding scene, Coppola uses his own family members as part of the crowd. Okay. So it's like, you know, that's the uncle and that's an aunt and that's my mother kissing the baby and all those things. Okay, influence of cinematographer Vittorio Storaro, a regular with Bernardo Bertolucci. Okay, so the Gordon Willis was hugely influenced by Storaro, but more than Gordon Willis, it was Coppola himself, because Coppola was a disciple of Bertolucci, and therefore he wanted that kind of an impact, that kind of an Italian feel to the movie. Interestingly, the hospital scenes where Michael is trying to save his father, okay, the beautifully shot scenes are done by George Lucas, a great friend of Coppola, a great admirer of Coppola. But then which film did he make? Forget American Graffiti, yes? Star Wars, and after that equations were changed forever. Then Coppola became a disciple, but that's another story. Okay, so that's hospital scenes, and if you remember the hospital scene, one of the best scenes in the movie, they are shot by George. Lucas. If you remember how the movie is generally, the look of the movie, earthy brown, yellow in places, and what Coppola wanted was an authentic church-like influence. Okay. Music is composed by, one is Coppola credits his own father. Yesterday I was talking about Coppola's father being a musician himself, flutist, Carmine Coppola. Okay, he was a professional, quite well regarded artist. So he contributed a lot, but the real music, or the major part of the credit goes to Nina Rota, who was a regular of Fellini. So look at Coppola's influences again: Bertolucci, Fellini, all the great Italian masters. Now, at this point I would like to draw your attention to another great movie which is made by Bertolucci, called The Conformist, which came a few years, just 2 years before The Godfather. And many critics, especially people like David Thompson, have read thematic parallels between Michael Corleone's character and the lead character in Bertolucci's The Conformist. Bertolucci's Conformist, which is all about how a regular, ordinary, decent guy is caught between the forces of two opposing forces of ordinary life, leading an ordinary life, and a life of betrayal and fascism. So he is forced to choose between the two. So loyalty towards his friends, or be an outcast, be a misfit in a society where loyalties are sold every day. Okay, and he decides to choose to conform. Okay, and if you look into Michael Corleone's character, he decides to let go of his essential humanity, decency, at least by the end of the second Godfather, when he orders his brother's death. Okay, so he is now the face of Satan himself. Okay, that's what he turns into. If you think of how he began and look at the graph of his character, the way he begins and the way he ends in the second Godfather, quite a transition. So what is the Conformist all about? A regular, decent fellow who becomes a victim of every sin, every weakness he has always dreaded in himself. That is the conformist. That is the basic core idea of the conformist. One of these days we will be watching the movie, but then if you watch the movie, you will find there are strong parallels between the guy in the Conformist and Michael Corleone. When he has to make a choice, he chooses to conform. So this is Michael before, and yesterday I was trying to draw your attention to the way he looks, the way he dresses, the look on his face, and then by the end of the first Godfather, when he orders the killing of his brother-in-law and confronts Talayasha character, and by now he is almost the Godfather.